Hey friends, if it isn't obvious from what's on screen right now, I'm about to do an exotic primary weapon tier list. I'm going to try to keep this friendly for the audio only viewers or listeners. And I normally would build this tier list one weapon at a time to keep viewer retention up or whatever, but I'm probably at GCX right now, and I wanted to keep the daily upload streak going, so this should be a fun video, at least so you can pick my brain. I get this question all the time on stream, and this is a good video to point them to. So let's list the tiers for the audio viewers. At the very top, we have two S tiers. It's not an S plus and an S minus. It's the lobby balance tier, and then the S tier under it. Under that is the A tier. Under that is legendaries with stats and perks better than exotics. So you can imagine your Igneous Hammer, your Drang, Elsie's Rifle, and Hung Jury. Then at the B tier. Under that, then the C tier, then the D tier, and then the F tier. There is nothing in the F tier at this moment because Bungie's done a pretty good job of making every exotic at least offer something unique to the table, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily helping you win the match because ease of use and potency come into play a lot, and I think that's what really separates these tiers. I want to try to structure my tier list as if somebody is really, really good at the game, like not aimbot level, but realistically attainable. And of course, the easier a weapon is to use, the faster you can get on target, and the more you're allowed to miss but still have it count as a hit, which means your reaction time is effectively faster. So easy use still matters, even if you have good aim, because in this game, when you're playing good players, they're all not going to peek at head level. They're going to short hop. They're going to use Dawnblade float. They're going to have invis. There's going to be a clone in the way, a smoke or something. Like, easy use matters so much in the heat of the moment, and I think that's really what separates these tiers, along with potency. Like, I love adaptive pulse rifles, but if I'm fighting against an Elsie's rifle, the 340 high impact, I lose more often than not, despite adaptives being a lot easier. Even if I have the damage boost sometimes, I still just trade because that TTK difference isn't enough compared to Elsie's. You do have to work a little bit harder with the high impact pulses, but with what players can realistically do in this game, they can get it done every time at the high level. So that's just one example. So let's start all the way at the top, the lobby balance tier. And this has weapons Red Death, Rat King, Final Warning, Cryosthesia, Teraba, Hawkmoon, No Time to Explain, and Ace of Spades. Not all of these weapons serve the exact same playstyle, but they accomplish lobby balance, overcoming lobby balance. So what that means is Bungie will throw new lights or players that don't shoot at all on your team. Sometimes those players won't even leave the back of the map. You can free up all the space in the world. You can get a bunch of kills in the feed, but that doesn't mean they're pushing up to help you stop the opponents from grabbing power ammo and ultimately making you get mercied. These weapons can say no to that matchmaking and get you a win. You have to really work for it. It can get you a win when Bungie says no. So the first is your ability to get your health back, and that comes from Red Death and Rat King. Then the next type of playstyle would be ratting for a kill. I know I just talked about Rat King, but I mean like really valuing your life, not overcommitting anything, and waiting until your win condition is set. And so that includes guns like Teraba, Hawkmoon, and No Time to Explain. Players who are really adept at this playstyle, No Time to Explain is superior to Red Death, despite Red Death having pretty much every perk the devs could think of on one gun. And it has very few weaknesses that are easily overcome with a basic build that involves Ophidians or something like that. And I would say Red Death is slightly better on controller than MNK, but it's great on both. No Time to Explain is definitely an MNK gun, though. And then finally, Ace of Spades is there because, not finally, I still got to talk about two others. Ace of Spades is on there because the radar up on a great frame, a 140 RPM, is fantastic for this game. Then you get Momentum Mori to give you a little bit of forgiveness and damage combo with abilities and whatnot. It's great. Large magazine, radar for heads up so you can manage your cover a little bit better in between fights. It makes all the difference in overcoming lobby balance. The next two odd ones are Cryosthesia, which I think in a Rumble scenario is possibly the best gun just because Rumble doesn't have skill-based matchmaking. And if there's another good opponent in the lobby, you don't have to beat them, you just have to farm the noobs faster. And Cryosthesia turns a noob from a single kill into a double kill, and with something like Diamond Lance, you can maybe turn 1 kill into 3 in a row, and one of those could be the good player in the lobby, and there's nothing they can do about it if they're the second or the third kill. That's what makes Cryosthesia so strong. And so in a sixes scenario, you can have a build where Cryosthesia can win you the game, but I don't think it's as potent or easy as the other options, but it still can be done. The next one to talk about is Final Warning. This one's pretty much reserved for Dawnblades, I would say. And the Dawnblade would probably have to be rocking double primary to get the kill volume necessary to out lobby balance the game. The next one to talk about is Final Warning. This one catches a lot of players off guard with just unfamiliarity. To beat it, you pretty much have to play as a team, which is asking a lot when you already know that lobby balance scenario, your teammates aren't going to be working with you. On the flip side, if you are adept with this weapon, you know the playstyle, you play top tree Dawnblade, you're very ambiguous with your heights, you know when to switch weapons. Typically, you do pair this with a pulse or a scout or a bow or something like that, so you can have decent ranges. Final Warning isn't just a gun for shooting around the corner, by the way. You can also use the aim down sights mode to have a deadlier sidearm than usual in a pinch when someone's aping you down with a shotgun. And it's fantastic. Every weapon on this lobby balancing tier, and maybe even this S tier, I would say would be deserving of a nerf depending on where Bungie's relative balance target is in the game. And I don't know what that is. Maybe they want weapons to be even more powerful than this current S tier, as they have been in the past. Like, if we compare any of this to a Destiny 1 gun, they don't really hold a candle. Because back in Destiny 1, Last Word and Thorn could 2-tap, and they had practically double their range. So they can definitely get more powerful, but they could also be a lot weaker. If you remember Destiny 2 Season 1, when everything was closer to a 1-second time to kill. It just depends on what their balancing target is. And the trend lately I've seen is everything is being a lot easier to use. Like, for example, you would think reaching 100 in a stat like aim assist would be a rarity, but a lot of guns, when you consider their perks, easily hit 100 stability, 100 range, or 100 aim assist, no problem. And that's usually the trade-off between them. I think the trade-off could be much steeper and really set one weapon apart from another in terms of easy use. I really think they have to tone it down for the game to play a little bit healthier, but of course that would require other changes around it, like ability potency, uptime, whatever. And I think that would make gunfights a lot more interesting. I would love to be able to trade off some of those things for flinch mitigation, so I won't have as easy of a time shooting, but maybe my shooting experience is consistent, so I can build a game plan around that. I don't know. It's a conversation for another day. Let's continue on the tier list. So now we're in the S tier, which features The Last Word, Traveler's Chosen, Jade Rabbit, Polaris Lance, Fighting Lion, Thorn, and Kvostov. All of these weapons, superior. Last Word, it's a machine gun with a 20 meter. It really is like a heavy machine gun with like a 20 meter drop off. If you use Lucky Pants, you can push it out for a 0.8 TTK at a distance. It's fantastic. Traveler's Chosen is like the only sidearm that I really recommend on mouse and keyboard. Well, maybe Rat King now that they've done the visual recoil change, but was previously the only sidearm I'd recommend on mouse and keyboard with how much it connects and how visually easy it is to see your target. Jade Rabbit and Polaris, you pull these out whenever you get like the map Eternity or Widow's Court, especially if you play a Dawnblade. And you can even double primary with these if the special ammo economy's right. I think all these weapons in this S tier get a big boost, especially Fighting Lion, and especially Last Word when you can supply the sniper ammo. But Jade and Polaris you could run a fusion rifle with and have a very well-rounded loadout. I get a lot of hate mail when I use a scout though. And sometimes, if you play it right, you can also overcome lobby balancing with it. Next up is Fighting Lion. With the primary pairing, it's still very good. And in hardware game modes where you don't have access to grenades or whatnot, checkmate or whatever, it's still superior because just having uptime on things that keep players away from hugging the wall makes for a much better play experience. That being said, in the land of ability spam, special weapons, whatever, Fighting Lion needs a very particular build to keep up, and that would be Rain of Fire with double grenade launcher. I don't think Sniper Rifle is as forgiving anymore, I don't think it's worth losing the range of going a shotgun or a slug shotgun compared to a primary. And a fusion doesn't really make that much sense with how this Fighting Lion works. Maybe in the future, if they make a glaive, that'd be interesting. They coded it under the hood, so you have a melee delay after shooting Fighting Lion. So a glaive would be interesting considering that you would swap to it to melee follow-up or shoot the projectile. So we'll see in the future. But just know you need a very special build for Fighting Lion these days. Next up is Thorn. I had moved Thorn all around this tier list over the years, and even now just simmering on it. It went from as low as B all the way to the lobby balance tier, and I just kept thinking about it. So it definitely lost some kill chaining and a round of nerfs in the past, but it also gained a catalyst that gives it extra range and the ability to overflow rounds, and that's great. But then we got another buff with the Prismatic Hunter, which it's one of the few hand cannons in the game that can inherently proc wall hacks from just achieving its time to kill. The other ones are Hawkmoon and Last Word. And then there are a couple legendary hand cannons that also can proc this. But that is what moved Thorn up to the S tier for me, locking in it. What Thorn brings to the table is Igneous Hammer is one of the most meta weapons in the game right now. Pair it with Chaperone or Conditional Finality. Thorn's damage over time helps let you use a 140 RPM hand cannon with the tempo of the 120 hand cannon. Because remember, with Precision Instrument, they can build up to only doing 2 head, 1 body. In that damage model, they do a bigger amount of your health per shot when they go into cover. So if you're peak shotting them, they can wait a like quarter second to get just a little bit amount of their health back and then repeak a 140 and they will win because the 140 has to still take 3 shots. Thorn delays that heal just enough so you can play aggressively to outperform 120s when they have the slight advantage. Then we go to Kvostov. Kvostov, once again, could have been in the lobby balance tier. It rightfully got nerfed. And this is one that I almost think deserves to go to A, but then when you equip the weapon, it's recoilless. It's only the fact that I don't really think auto rifles are that good in the meta right now, but this is the one exception. It's the inverse of Red Death, where Red Death gives you health back to duel the next fight. Kvostov keeps enemies grouped together weak by ricocheting bullets between all of them. And if you have a Devour setup, you can of course shoot the Orb of Light you're making from multi-kill as a Reaper and be very aggressive. Where it lacks a little bit is in range. So if they know you have Kvostov and you're not equipped with the sniper rifle, they can of course just backpedal a little bit and you'll probably lose it. I need a lot more time with Kvostov before I solidify its position, but at the current moment, I think it's a tail end of S tier. And does that mean it doesn't deserve another round of nerfs? I don't know. I'm going to let Bungie decide what that balancing target is. A tier. We have Dead Man's Tale, Lumina, Manticore, Tiku's, Lemon Arc, Devil's Ruin, Sunshot, Touch of Malice, Trespasser, Necrochasm. Sometimes it takes me an extra second to remember the icons here of some of these weapons, so forgive me if that jump cut was a little too harsh. Let's start off with Dead Man's Tale, which wavers from the best weapon in the game to practically unusable on an input device. In this case, I think it trends to be slightly better on controller, but the playstyle associated with it is still superior on mouse and keyboard. What I mean by that is if you're planted in a duel with no cover around you or whatever, I think controller wins that duel more often than not against most MNK players. For the most elite MNK players, though, the game isn't just a stationary duel without cover. It's bob and weaving, jumping in the air, comboing it with your shotgun, whatever. And Dead Man's Tale still does that. The advantage, I should have talked about this with Last Word. Wait, where did Last Word go on this list? Audio, oh, okay, I accidentally moved it when I was clicking on the tab. Let's get back on track here. The advantage of hipfire is your radar is open, and I like the bigger field of view I get, so I'm more aware of what to do next, especially when fighting multiple targets. And I also think my aim is a lot more comfortable from the hip, despite the game not bending the bullet as hard on most of the weapons in the game. It's still usable on mouse and keyboard, but it is a very clear shadow of its former self back when it used to refrigerate or bend bullets like no other. Next up is Lumina, with the Boots of the Assembler build or just a very aggressive team play, Lumina's great. The healing frame auto rifle is also good, but you can never beat the ease of use of a hand cannon, peak shotting, hugging cover, etc. Next up is Manticore. This is one of the sleeper picks of the day for this tier list, and a lot of y'all have a question mark on this one. Once SMGs got target lock nerfed, Manticore started to become a thought for me, and as I playtested it more and more, I realized it's very good, especially if you play console only. On PC land, you're not going to get too much advantage with this because players are mostly used to looking up, but on console, you are going to shred lobbies, and there's a couple aerial builds that would really benefit from this. A lot of people recommend Blink. I think I really like Omnioculus for Manticore because you can always have a smoke to slam down. So you would use, like, I don't know, triple or control jump and float over a doorway, get your shot. They think you're going to land. They throw the smoke at the floor. They throw the swarm, but you're already too high above it. Maybe they reactively throw a barricade, but you still can see over the barricade. And if you know you're in trouble, you either double swap weapons or slam to the ground. And your advantage for doing this is a faster time to kill and an overshield with Manticore. It is very, very strong. Next up is Tiku's, which might go down a tier, might go to B tier. And my reasoning is it always depends on the strength of legendary bows. And before this recent legendary bow buff, Tiku's was one of the few that could damage combo. All you do is hip fire to mark, then immediately full draw and aim for the head, and that's a kill. One body, one head. I'm going to move it comfortably to B tier now that I've said that out loud, and we're going to talk about Lemon Arc next. Despite Lemon Arc, actually, I think it has a bugged damage model right now where it's not exactly agreeing with what was proposed on paper. I don't exactly remember it here. But at the end of the day, poison damage is the same reason that I listed Thorn as a good weapon. Helps you keep tempo when fighting similar playstyles. Next up is Devil's Ruin. I think if you pair this with Khepri's Sting, you're going to be in for a great time. Or even Knucklehead Radar to get those wall hacks. Recharge. This is a weapon that when it first came out, I said, you're going to see like a Trial Sherpa, Grenadier Jake type player have a lot of success with this weapon because it's set up for 1v3s if you're a good sniper. It's like your first kill can be the snipe, your second one can be pushing up on that body, just dumping sidearm rounds. Maybe you get the second, you're at the end of your magazine because you had to shoot clones, smokes, barricades, whatever. And then for the third, you charge the laser, go back to your sniper rifle that was kinetic holstered, and you're looking at a solo team wipe. If you do it all right. Does it always happen like that? No, but the potential's there, and I think that's what makes Devil's Ruin so good. In checkmate scenarios, it was nerfed, but I think it was barely a slap on the wrist, and the community stopped using it for some reason, despite it being incredible. So, keep that one on your radar. It's fantastic. Next up is Sunshot. This is the only 150 RPM, and in a similar case to Thorn, this helps you basically dual 120s when they're outside of cover and guarantee that you don't trade. Although you may not think there's much of a difference between 0.87 and 1 second time to kill, you're still going to trade with this networking sometimes. It might just happen. Sunshot might be that little bit of network buffer needed to not trade. It also shoots explosive rounds, which now have trade-offs, but the biggest benefit to explosive rounds, and I recently went through this when I was doing my something new hand cannon video. When I got hit by an explosive rose, I could not return fire for the life of me on mouse and keyboard. Just completely miss everything. So don't sleep on explosive rounds either. Very good. Next up is another sleeper one, just like Manticore. This is Touch of Malice. I initially rated this one a lot lower, but as this season progressed a little bit, I realized that you don't necessarily have to dump to the final bullet. You can dump to like bottom 3, bottom 4, and then just shoot normally, and it takes a bullet off your time to kill, and that keeps up with Polaris Lance and Jade Rabbit. It's fantastic. The only thing I can say is this is probably better in, I want to say, round Slayer game modes where you don't have to constantly keep reloading and dumping. You can just keep it bottomed out and use it that way. Because in Trials, when you have to start every single round by dumping the magazine, first of all, it's super loud, but it also takes a little bit to do. You may think you're still fast, Icarus dashing and doing the Warlock Glide bouncing, emptying it, but you're also allowed, so they know exactly where you are and what lanes to avoid as a result of that. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I think it's very, very strong and worthy of A tier. Trespasser. If you look at the time to kill on this thing, it goes crazy depending on if you activate the perk, if the enemy is low resilience, or if you get a slight damage booster. It's just like an adaptive pulse rifle. I believe it ranges from 0.73 base against 10 resilience to you just get a armor surge or two, and now it's a 0.5. Then if you activate the perk, 0.3 with those circumstances. So very, very, very solid gun. I would say for Bakris hunters, this is a no-brainer. However, Bakris also has some other very enticing options, so I could see how this is looked over, but I think it is very, very solid. Even the enhanced radar comes up too. Necrochasm lives in the shadow of Kvostov now, but in 6s, you could say that Necrochasm is functionally similar for punishing groups, but I think Kvostov is superior in that job. Necrochasm does get Desperado, which helps you with multiple duels. I will tell you firsthand, using both of the guns on roller, Necrochasm kicks like crazy once you have Desperation active, and I find it really, really hard to land my TTK. But if you can overcome that, it's a very, very solid weapon for kill chaining, and especially punishing a revive. You might get a kill, progress Desperation, then they revive, and then you delete the revive or reser with that TTK, and then the Firefly goes off and weakens both of them. Then you snap target and get another Firefly, and you see the vision. It's very solid. The next tier is legendaries with stats and perks better than exotics, and this doesn't include all of them. There's a lot of legendary bows that come to mind, and there's multiple weapons of their tier that come to mind. Like there's Messenger and Elsie's rifle that are pulse rifles. There's the Summoner Auto Rifle. I can list a bunch of them, but for now I just picked 4 to represent the different engagement distances. There's Drang for close quarters. There's Igneous Hammer for everything else, and yes, I do mean everything else because you really just use your shotgun to combo those awkward distances that are Drang range or something like that. The shot of Igneous and swap to conditional. Then outside of Igneous range is Elsie's rifle. That's where that's dominant. You want to just barely be at that distance where you can 2-burst. It's a similar distance to Igneous Hammer, and if you can slightly get them out of cover, Elsie's wins every time. If they're very disciplined and hug the wall, Elsie's still might win even when it has the superior damage fall off. It's just a razor's edge how close those two weapons are. Next up is the Box Breathing Scout, which is beyond Elsie's rifle. That one, same thing with Dawnblade, float, get an off angle, or go invis, catch somebody with their back to you. A 0.67 from anywhere on the map. This goes all the way back to that easy use discussion. A 0.67 can keep up with Drang, but good luck hitting a moving target point blank with a Box Breathing Scout or Elsie's. It can be done, but it can't be done consistently every time with faster reaction time. It's not going to happen. Drang's lower zoom and more magnetized bullets up close make it superior up close. So I hope that's clear. The weapons that I'm going to list below these legendaries overall have to trade off something that in my opinion makes it worse than the overall loadout of these legendaries. Because it's not just Igneous Hammer by itself. It's Igneous Hammer combined with Conditional or Chaperone. It's a Box Breathing Scout and Prometheus Lens or something like that. I could go on and on and on. Starting off the B tier, I just added Tikus. Then we have Graviton Lance, Crimson, Necro Osteostriga. I was wanting to say Necrotic Grips. Have to remember all these. Collective Action, Tommy's Matchbook, Suros Regime, Sturm, Malfeasance, Revision Zero, Skyburners, Wishender, Cerberus, and then Vex Mythoclast. Alright, I got them all. Memory's still with me today. Starting off with Tikus, with the recent legendary bow buff, I think Tikus can be brought back down to B. In a team scenario, maybe you have a lot of Tikus. I could see it being pretty potent. The fact that they put you on a clock just for getting tagged by it is very worth mentioning. It's also very easy to hit that first shot. Very solid. Graviton Lance I put up here because I just die to it all the time. Now, when I use it, I think it's inferior to a Box Scout or even Jade Rabbit. But when I'm playing with, like, let's say, Ace of Spades, just standard loadout and sixes, I'll be past a We Ran Out of Metals. And the weapon that, without fail, always takes me out is Graviton Lance. I will lose the most blatant duel where I'm a shot ahead. I'll just get gunned by the noob. I can't explain it. This weapon just has my number. And if it has my number that consistently, I think it's worth mentioning for the tier list. So I made sure to move it way higher than I thought it was deserving of. Next up is Crimson, which lives in the shadow of Red Death. Crimson is a build crafting weapon where you do have to look for that slight boost to time to kill, whether through Radiant or Armor Surge or something like that. It flinches like crazy, and in the console only meta is very strong. But when you now have to deal with Red Death, I don't think it holds a candle to it, although I can say it is more fun and more satisfying to use, and I prefer to use it over Red Death just because it's more fun. Osteostriga's next. This one, I think if you pair it with a Dawnblade or a Lion Rampant Titan, you're on mouse and keyboard for the fast, rapid movement. I think you can put in some work with this, almost deserving of moving up to A tier or higher if you know exactly what you're doing. I think that's all that needs to be said from that one. A collective action. Or is this collective obligation? Collective action is the perk. Someone probably corrected me already. Sorry for making you waste time on the comment. I've talked about this one even in recent videos. This gets stronger the more of them you add, and ideally you want to be running Armamentarium Void Titan with Controlled Demolition and Weaken Grenades. You can have all of the effects at once. It's very solid. Next up would be maybe Gear Falcon Hunter if you're farming those Solstice bounties. It's a very solid weapon that finds itself in a team environment almost always having that damage boost up and the capacity to suppress opponents to keep them off abilities and keep them from having good roaming supers. Next up is B, Tommy's Matchbook, and I don't know if I'm downplaying this gun or not. Out of all the weapons in here, if I had to pick one that is my current favorite at the moment, it is Tommy's Matchbook. So that's why I wonder if I'm downplaying it. It has about a 30-meter damage drop-off before its TTK starts to suffer a little bit. It's a 0.8 time to kill-ish. And once you spin up the perk, it can go all the way down to 0.5, but of course you're losing health, which is improving someone else's time to kill. So that's not too much to write home about. That is not why it makes it good. It's a 100-round magazine, can be fired accurately from the hip, decently accurate in the air, applies Scorch, which can give you wall hacks on Hunter. It has a lot of pros and cons. It's not brainless to use, which is why I say I feel like I'm downplaying this once I list all these benefits, but try to use it against some top SMG players or even some very disciplined hand cannon players. You're lucky to get anything going with this. I struggle when the player skill starts to rise in the lobby with this. Still one of the most fun weapons I use, but maybe that just means that I have to stop doing the content creator thing and reviewing guns and really just sit there for a good month or two, really getting good with Tommy's Matchbook. Maybe I am downplaying it. I don't know. Have to either wait and see or let a Tommy's Matchbook goat in the comment section tell me why I'm not finding as much success with the gun. But the lobby balance guns, once again, I'm outperforming Bungie's matchmaking. So let's move on. Suros Regime has the two firing modes. I would say the spinning up is where it's at, but know that it's a little choreographed. So once they start hearing you go past time to kill, they're just going to say, all right, I'll wait till he's done spinning up before I peek. Can be a benefit, can be good for multi-kills. You get your health back, which would make you think it goes to lobby balance tier or S tier, but we still have Kvostov, which again is the inverse of that. It keeps the opponents weak. You don't necessarily get a heal, but if you have Devour, some orb shooting perk, you can get your health back that way by shoot to looting. So yeah, Kvostov kind of ran Suros out of town. The focus fire mode's good, but there's a lot better ranged options that are, let's just look at Elsie's rifle, for example. I'd pick Elsie's rifle 10 times out of 10 rather than the focus fire Suros. Spinning up's really good. You can Actium War Rig it if you want to have an even better experience, but you need to have like Dragon Shadow or Marksman's Dodge, Rain of Fire, something like that to get the maximum value out of Suros, because you know that they're going to peek as soon as they hear that magazine empty. Next up is Sturm, and I know you can use it with Drang. Drong, whatever you want to pronounce it. But on paper, this is basically Igneous Hammer, the exotic version, except it doesn't have precision instrument, so therefore it's inferior. It's still a really solid hand cannon that I think a lot of high skill players can take all the way to maximum comp rank Ascendant with just Sturm and a shotgun. It is that consistently good. But it doesn't really do anything exotic besides just being Igneous Hammer in a different slot. Moving on, Malfeasance. Back when the healing meta, healing turret, warlock turret meta was there, I used Malfeasance and freezes by myself to be able to keep up with them. Was it better? No, not even close. But it could put a dent in it, which is saying something compared to almost all of the other sandbox. Malfeasance gets better the more of them you put on a team, and meta after meta after meta after meta that was frustrating. I realized Malfeasance wasn't a great answer to it, but it was an answer to it that I overlooked. Like back in the day, we had the one-eyed mask meta, we had the classy restoration meta. Malfeasance can answer all of those. Although it doesn't share all the characteristics of a 180 hand cannon, like the inner accuracy, the recoil, whatever. Well, maybe it does share the recoil. It just doesn't feel like other 180s. And its exotic perk makes up for that in a good way. Revision 0 is next. This should be a lot better. It should be with Hawkmoon in no time for the ratting perk. You're ratting for a sniper rifle. But in practice, it gets hella dueled by LCs. And then you throw on the 2-burst mode instead of the 4-round burst mode, and you think like, oh, I can peak shot that much harder, but you've tanked your time to kill. Yes, its range is superior in some ways, but it's just not enough. Just not enough. Moving on, Skyburners. You would think it keeps up with Jade and Polaris. If you run an Ignition build, it's really good, but Hipfire comes up, especially when shotgunning. Or Hipfire just in general. An easier Hipfire shot that you don't have to account for tracking or whatever is probably worth the exotic gimmick of lobbing a Scorch round and keeping them weak. But if you can master that, it could be in the S tier. If you can master that and have the Ignition build. For general use, though, I definitely think B's a comfortable place to put it. Moving on, Wish Ender. It's a wall hack bow. Even if you don't shoot it at the opponent once, just getting the information for, like, let's just say an auto rifle and playing off that information is already really strong, and I can never see it moving below the B tier. I can only see it moving up, depending on especially how much invis is in play. Cerberus got a buff with a sort of kill chaining catalyst now, but it also got a previous nerf where you can't break your own crystals. For freeze builds, it's still fantastic because it's a lot of primary bullets coming out at once point blank on a frozen target with the rending. They get pretty much insta-nuked. It's great. And when you're getting double meleeed by a Titan, oftentimes this will kill them before they even get the double melee off, even though it is a spread pattern, so it is RNG. Fantastic weapon, suffers from handling, and there's a sweet spot where you can RNG the TTK just a little bit faster as well. So it has a little bit of a consistency issue, but if you can get past that in the handling, it's a fantastic weapon to pair, especially with grenade launchers. Vex Mytho class is next with a Rain of Fire fusion rifle build. You can proc Radiant and then start chaining the damage perks of Vex Mytho class to build up a linear fusion rifle. And it's still really good, although if you're dueling, a lot of other weapons in that engagement space are superior for the first kill. Vex Mytho class is only really good after getting past that first kill. Let's move on to C tier. C tier, we have Sweet Business, Quicksilver Storm, Centrifuge, Vigilance Wing, Monte Carlo, Outbreak Perfected, Risk Runner, Transfiguration. No, what's this called? It's called Symmetry. Then we have Trinity Ghoul and the Huckleberry. Let's start with Sweet Business. Sweet Business got a hella buff back in the day. And I won a lot of games with it. It became glued to my inventory because I knew when to pull it out on my Dawnblade. However, it goes hand in hand with the strength of hand cannons. The stronger and easier to use hand cannons are, the weaker Sweet Business is because you can't even get value out of pre-firing them. They pre-fire for like a frame, shoot you once, they get their like 90 damage, and you maybe might equalize that, but if they have multiple players on a lot of different angles, you're just gonna get destroyed by disciplined hand cannon players. That's what I run into my problem with Sweet Business. But in the equipment meta of Titan barricades and whatnot, I was frying players with this gun. It's very good. So if hand cannon's ever gonna nerf, you're gonna see me put on Sweet Business a lot more. Quicksilver Storm got a nerf where the micro missile, nano rocket, whatever it's called, doesn't come out as quick. So you have to shoot more bullets to get to the nano rocket, and therefore it lacks behind, once again, Kvastov, Necrochasm. Let's move on to Centrifuge. Once you max out the bar on Centrifuge, it feels like it has under the hood stats that are beyond max and becomes a very easy shooting experience. That being said, it's still a precision frame auto rifle, which leaves a lot to be desired. And even if a hand cannon user had no cover, they're probably beating you, and at best, you're trading. Vigilance Wing. If I had to make a recommendation to a brand new Destiny player who's getting into PvP and wanted something to be the rock from when they're a noob to when they're a very high skill player, safe to bet on Vigilance Wing. Fundamentally, if you know how to play, this will handle everything that the game throws at you. So it's a very mid weapon, but it's consistently mid. And it has always been in that place for all of the metas of the game ever. A reminder, you can run this with a low recovery build, since if your teammates die, it gives you health back. I was constantly switching Rat King to Vigilance Wing back in the day to offset my low recovery builds. Next up, Monte Carlo. This one is great for melee-based builds. I was running, probably yesterday's video, Weavlock shenanigans with Daltonix and Elite 4K. That video is so funny, so I think you should check it out. I really, really do. Anyway, if you get a melee-based kill like the Arc Warlock Lightning Surge, it's very easy to come out with the damage bonus of Swashbuckler times 5 and chew up some players. That being said, in a duel, before any of that happens, you're losing with Monte Carlo. Losing to SMGs, losing to other auto rifles, losing to other guns, period. It's just not that great. And then they added the glaive part of Monte Carlo, which is not great either. Next up is Outbreak, and I know this might be the biggest cause of the comment section to write something. Maybe I undervalued it. I struggle using it. I can't get anything done with it despite it being a laser. That 450 RPM, if it's not the BXR Battler, is just not for me. Next up, Risk Runner. This is a very meta-dependent weapon. If it's a very arc-infested Crucible, obviously throw on Risk Runner and it does fine. It surpasses Manticore when the circumstances are right, or if you can self-proc. Next up is Symmetry, not Transfiguration. You would think that it deserves to be with Hawkmoon, and no time to explain. Build up your rat perk, hip fire those like arc missiles or whatever comes out of the gun after you build up Revolution times 8 or 9, something like that to guarantee it. And it's fine. They're not exactly easy to aim. Opponents that play really fast can avoid them a lot of the time. The gun at base is not great for dueling, whereas Hawkmoon and No Time rip other guns with that .67 or peak shot potential. Symmetry struggles to achieve that time to kill at a distance that a player just gets away. And of course that's fine because you're working towards your perk, but with other guns they would just flat out be dead. With No Time they might flat out be dead and you're working towards your damage perk. That's why Symmetry fails to match their potency. Next up, Trinity Ghoul. I'm not talking about momentum control, but in general, there are some things you can do with like Thunderclap that is really fun. Shoot the floor, immediately Thunderclap. After a Trinity Ghoul arc shot, this can proc Thread of Isolation or the Tangle Making fragments by just landing headshots. It's pretty good, but because it shoots a triple arrow, it has a artificial range cap that is around hand cannon distance, and that is not where you want to be using the bow. You either want to be like convoying a bow into a glaive as close as you can, or you really just want to be far off scout rifle distance. Next up is the Huckleberry. I recently picked this one up, and I know Bungie said that they're going to buff it soon. I think it's fine for an SMG. I just think a lot of other SMGs are easier to use and or have a better kill perk. Yes, an instant magazine reload and Rampage is good, but if you're on a Peacekeeper Titan, you can non-load by double swapping the weapon, and your mag gets refilled like a quarter second later, or you just backpack it for a quarter second. Regardless, I just don't think it compares to legendaries. Now we move on to the D tier. We have Bad Juju, Might of Multi-Tool, Wicked Implement. I had to remember that one. Oh no, I don't know this one either. It's called Wishkeeper. And then we have Verglass Curve, and then we have Hierarchy of Needs, and then we have Hard Light. You can tell by just me struggling to remember the names of some of these weapons how inferior or not impactful these weapons are. A Bad Juju you would think would be awesome with the kill chaining and the super energy, but I find on both input devices it's very bouncy, and I struggle to get my time to kill with it against almost anything on this list, or just, a regular legendary weapon. The multi-tool, Might of Multi-Tool, radar up is great, but it's a lightweight scout, and it also, compared to other scouts, lacks on range, which is ease of use at a distance, which just doesn't compare. The radar up is great, but I think Bungie needs to revisit the Mida synergy between this and its SMG counterpart, maybe even refreshing the SMG's perks, as well as giving it extra bonuses for choosing to go double primary. Same with Sermon Drink. Next up is Wicked Implement. Already forgot about it in like the last minute here, but by landing shots, you build up slow stacks, which can lead to a freeze. If you're playing Weave Walk opponents, this might be a future meta, but for now, let it sit in the vault. It's fine. It can help kind of be like a longer range Monte Carlo, but just move on. Wishkeeper. It's fun, but I don't know how practical it is, especially when you lose the hipfire functionality of the bow. And same with Verglass Curve, which I have a soft spot for because I really like getting on those gargoyle spots of the map with glacier nades, and this helps build into that playstyle. So it's fun, but as a bow and your exotic slot, it's very hard to warrant it. Then we have Hierarchy of Needs, which should be a team play exotic where you create the circles and shoot through it, but not very practical. Finally is Hard Light, which it does have a stat package, etc., that keeps up with its legendary counterparts, but the perk itself is either you have the ricochet bullets that double ricochet and do a little bit of extra damage, versus like kill clip, target lock, etc. Then you have Kvostov that, wow, comparing Hard Light to Kvostov, it just dawned on me how much easier it is to use Kvostov than Hard Light. A lot of times I'm looking for that ricochet angle with Hard Light, and someone just jiggle peeks me with a hand cannon and I just lose. So, despite Hard Light being a very, very good beginner weapon in PvP, and use what you want, use whatever you find success with. I'm not like hating on the gun. I still sometimes have a good match with Hard Light from time to time, but it just doesn't do enough compared to the legendaries, and it's not even close to Kvostov, so that's why it's in D. I hope I did a good example explaining why everything deserves to be in each tier, and this is not a finalized list. I only spent a couple hours throughout a couple days on this, like going around. It was always on the side monitor. I'd play with the weapon and be like, does that really deserve to be in B tier? And then I'd move it, screenshot it, rebuild the tier list the next play session, think about it again just based on what I'm dying to, whatever. So this is what I ended up with, but it's definitely not final, and the comment section will help mold the next one. And maybe Bungie hits us with a balance patch that makes it very, very obvious where each distinct tier deserves to be. Hope you enjoyed this conversation, friends, this discussion video, audio video, whatever. See you all on the next.